Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
Welcome back to Nighttime Talk with Gary Brennan in for Niall Boyle. And now it's that time of the evening where we get prepared for a big interview, and I'm particularly looking forward to this one because I've always been fascinated by Pompeii. So new DNA evidence from the bodies of Pompeii victims of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius has found many of our assumptions about who they really were have been false. The ancient city of Pompeii in Italy was buried in a volcanic eruption almost 2,000 years ago. Citizens were buried in ash and volcanic material, preserving their last moments. Plaster casts have been made of victims' bodies, and they now appear to show scenes believed to be a mother holding a child and two women embracing as they die. But new research has revealed not all is what it seems. So joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Vicki Moses, who is a Roman archaeologist whose research focuses on ancient DNA from sites around the Mediterranean. She's a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University in a position funded by the Getty. You're very welcome to the show, Vicki, and thank you so much for joining me this evening. Hello, Vicki. There you are. Now I have you. Vicki, can you hear me? Hello, Vicki. Okay, we had Vicki for a second, but I actually grew up with a guy, and he went to study to be an archaeologist himself, and he was always fascinated by Pompeii, and I'm sure he's listening in tonight, and he's dying to hear what Vicki has to say, as we all are, and we're going to get her on the line now just in a moment, because it really is an interesting topic, and I've been looking forward to talking about it all day, especially considering it was 2,000 years ago. And I think we have Vicki now, do we? Vicki?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Vicki? Hello, Vicki? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, no, we're having some serious trouble with the lines tonight. I don't know what's going on. There's something going on with the internet or whatever it is the gremlins are in. But I can't wait to ask her about what prompted all this DNA research in the first place. Because we saw recently enough with the Shroud of Turin, didn't we? That very famous relic that people have discounted over the years. They did a study on it many, many years ago, and they said that it was a fake, but now recent studies have suggested that it might actually be real, that the carbon dating was wrong. So I wouldn't mind actually asking Vicki about that as well. But it just shows you that history is constantly changing, and especially with the emergence of new technology. And they use DNA in this particular situation to find out a little bit more about the victims of Pompeii after Mount Vesuvius erupted 2,000 years ago. And I've always wondered about Pompeii in the sense that you would imagine that when lava comes down from a mountain, it eviscerates everything completely. You know, that would be my take on it as a purely as a layman's take. But it didn't do that. It preserved many things. It preserved houses and statues and indeed people and victims of what happened. So it really is a truly remarkable thing. And people go there all the time. You know, it's a tourist place, and people want to see what happened in Pompeii, and our understanding of it is getting better and better. And we're just trying to get Vicki on the phone there. So if you just bear with us a moment, we'll have her back in no time. Vicki, can you hear me? Hello, Vicki.
Hi.
There we go. We have you, Vicki. It's great.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. I've just been filling air now talking about you. I think I gave you the best introduction.
Okay, great.
We had a bit of a problem, but you're in the States right now, aren't you? Okay, well, I'll get to it now. I'm just going to ask you...
I am, yes. I'm based here at Harvard.
And Harvard.
So calling in from across the sea.
Well, it's great to talk to you. I'll just get to the first question that I am fascinated to ask you with. In terms of what happened with Mount Vesuvius, as I just mentioned, would, from a layman's point of view, think that lava would cut through everything and completely eviscerate it, but it didn't do that. Can you explain to us why it didn't do that, and how this whole thing came to be, that we have these remnants of in Pompeii?
So the way that the Mount Vesuvius erupted with these kind of pyroclastic blasts, they call them, and then also all this ash, it filled the area so quickly, and instead of being lava that would have, like you said, eviscerated everything, it's this ash that actually ended up preserving things very well, and kind of for things like wood, we have that preserved because it just burns so quickly, and then it kind of got preserved underneath all this ash. And then for our study, the really unique part about this is that the people who were caught in this moment of eruption, many of them were covered immediately with this ash, and then where their bodies lay, when they excavated, they found these kind of cavities, these holes where it was in the exact shape of where the person fell. And so that's where we were able to, they filled that with plaster, and then that ends up being these plaster casts that we see that are in the shape of the people. But inside of those casts are also human bones, because the bones preserved. So everything else decays. It's kind of morbid, but that's what we were able to use for the ancient DNA.
And what prompted this DNA research, and how did you and your team go about it?
The field of ancient DNA is just taking off in this exponential way, and so that's really thanks to collaborative research. So for me, I work with the Science of the Human Past team here at Harvard. We work with David Reich Lab, and then we also work with the Max Planck. And all of this goes to be, you first start with the archaeologists who are on site or conservators, and they were doing conservation work on these casts so that they can be preserved forever and tourists can look at them and we can keep studying them. And when they did this conservation work, there was a couple of things. First of all, they realized that there were some fishy, maybe artistic things that they did when they made these casts in the 18th century. And so that means that there are metal rods in some of them. Some of them are missing a lot of bones. Some of them may be embellished what a facial feature or garments would have looked like that were maybe a little bit exaggerated. And so inside, some of the bones were accessible, and those bones are now giving us kind of a hard evidence, hard science look at what these people were like that maybe contradicts what the casts appear to say.
So this is the first time there's been DNA testing done on the bones?
Exactly. So there are a few individuals from Pompeii and even actually some horse DNA that have been studied. But the casts themselves, this is the first time. And the casts are such a unique moment of definitely individuals who were killed during this eruption, this natural disaster. And so we're hopefully going to have even more DNA evidence from one of our senior researchers. Alyssa Mitnick works a lot with Roman Italy. And so hopefully we'll know even more and be able to kind of compare these plaster casts to other people who lived at the same time.
And what were the findings, and what did you find out, and how did they challenge previous narratives about the remains of Pompeii?
So one of the areas that was able to make some of these casts, it was actually excavated in the 1970s, and so they updated the techniques, and these casts are made out of resin. I don't know, small detail, but they contain the human remains of 4 individuals. And these people were all found very close together, appearing to be sheltering together. And from the shape of the people, you can tell that it's 2 adults and 2 children. And we all just assumed that this was a family, especially because you have one of the people was holding one of the infants and had a really big golden bracelet on that gives the house its name. And this golden bracelet made us think, oh, this must be the mother holding the baby on her hip. Well, the DNA results show us that not only is that person a male, but the 2 children are unrelated to that person. So we now know that they're all males and they're unrelated. And so you have to wonder, now the news stories get written of how could you have 4 unrelated people in this house instead of what we always thought, this family.
So it sounds to me, Vicki, that in many ways this brings something that we thought was almost like a flat story that we thought we knew everything about it. This brings it to life, and we start to understand more about, dare I say it, even relationships, because as you said, what we thought was something is it's completely different entirely.
It's so true, and it's also very cool to be able to say things like, we think we know the hair color and eye color and skin tone better for some of these individuals. We know a little bit about their ancestry. There's so much more that we can say that we would have never been possible without ancient DNA.
And tell us about that ancestry, because it shows similarities to Rome, but you came across a few surprises about it along the way, didn't you?
So genetically speaking, you have kind of this rift between what you saw in Italy up through the periods preceding the empire. And so those people genetically look a certain way. And then once you get into the Roman Empire, and so also during the time when Pompeii experienced this eruption, you see that the people have a lot of ancestry that relates to the Eastern Mediterranean, some Levant, Anatolia, just more movement appearing to happen from the East that you didn't have in previous periods. So that really speaks to the fact that people were moving all around the empire at this point. And the people that we have from Pompeii in this study, we were able to do another scientific test that's called isotope analysis. And the strontium, which is a way of telling whether people ate food that came from a local area or drank water locally, and that we kind of use that as a proxy to see if they migrated during their lifetime. These people seem to have been local. So even though they have ancestry that shows Eastern Mediterranean, these people were born and raised in Pompeii, most likely.
And what other insights do we get into what life would have looked like back then, like our understanding of the social dynamics and the relationships in Pompeii?
I think that this really draws out the fact that some of our older ways of interpreting things just based on proximity to each other, how people lie, maybe gender roles, a lot of these things are called into question. And I think when you think about these casts, you really have to acknowledge the fact that this was such an abnormal moment. So even though you think about, this does rewrite our understanding of what relationships could have been like in the day-to-day, but you also have to think about how would people respond to a tragedy. Maybe these people were coming together that barely knew each other, and you just can't make assumptions using just proximity to each other to say, oh, these people definitely were related.
And Vicki, are there any ethical considerations or challenges associated with conducting DNA analysis on ancient human remains?
Absolutely. So this is something that geneticists have thought a lot about, and I come from more an archaeology, anthropology background, and you really have to think about what not only does this mean for the ancient people and whether the ancestors of these ancient people are interested in the studies, and you have to make sure you speak to people on the ground, but then also you have to think about how can this help us improve lives of people today. So one of the areas that our team at the Reich Lab and at the Max Planck are thinking about a lot is disease. So, for example, malaria. We can look for evidence of malaria genetically in these individuals, and that's helping us understand pandemics in the past, diseases, experiences, how that affects genetics today. So I think in terms of one of the positive ethical considerations is using ancient data to make some real medical changes for humans who live now.
I wonder, Vicki, could you give me a kind of flavour for the previous assumptions that we thought about Pompeii, that this is completely blown apart?
Yeah, there's another example of how this kind of shows those ideas of what we assume about people in the past. Is there's another example of some of the DNA we were able to extract from what was expected to be a mother and a daughter or sisters embracing, because our gender norms, looking backwards, we think, oh, it must be women because men would never embrace in that way. And in fact, DNA showed that one of them was a male. So we kind of have to challenge our assumptions about what people of different sexes, how they would have interacted with each other in the past.
And what surprised you most?
I think for me, one of the most exciting things was that there was even DNA preserved in there. So with DNA work, we know that certain skeletal elements, certain parts of the body are more likely to give us good results. And as you may have seen in the publication, we tested, I think, 14 individuals, and only 5 of them had DNA preserved well enough that we were able to capture and with certainty say a lot about their ancient DNA. And we're gaining better techniques all the time thanks to the work of these geneticists and these laboratory technicians. But for me, it's just incredible that we were able to use these plaster casts that were made hundreds of years ago in some cases and have this DNA preserved.
And for any budding archaeologists out there, we got a question in off somebody that wanted to know, if you want to conduct research in Pompeii, who do you have to get permission from?
Yes, so there are a lot of projects still ongoing. I know it's hard to believe that there's still so much to do in Pompeii, but there are active excavations. And there are different levels. I can say that Tulane University, for example, I'm part of a team who's actively excavating there. So if you're a budding archaeologist, you can look them up and see if you want to try and get some field experience. It's an incredible site, and there are so many more opportunities, especially as we get these new scientific analyses possible.
And could the same DNA analysis technique be applied to other ancient archaeological sites to gain similar insights into past populations?
Absolutely, and this is what we're working on every day with these Science of the Human Past group, the Max Planck group as well, the David Reich Lab. We really can use a lot of these techniques, but you don't lose the fact that in an archaeological site, the questions you want to ask and what the material can tell you is going to be unique for every site. So if you have a site that has hundreds of tombs and people are buried with other people and you assume, oh, that must be a family, well, now we can test that if that's what the archaeological site looks like. So the questions that we want to ask vary from site to site, and so we always are responsive to what would be interesting about that site, what do we know historically or archaeologically, what are the questions that we want to ask.
Do you think, Vicki, that there's so much going on in history that we really don't understand, and there's still so much more to learn?
I was so surprised when I found out that archaeologist was a real job that you can have. That there is still more to do, and it's just growing, because I think we are our minds are so open to questioning, the traditions of the field. So Roman archaeology, for example, has kind of they've overly emphasized historical texts or kind of privileging, proving exactly what the ancient authors say or how we thought society functioned. And now we're really fighting against that, and there's just so much more to do. And you can take some things these casts, for example, they were created hundreds of years ago in a site that's, 2,000 years old, and there's still new surprises every time you design a study and able to look at the materials.
Is there anywhere around the world, Dr. Vicki, that you would love to go and, like your bucket list, that you'd love to go and work and learn more about? Or is it Pompeii?
Oh, I think I'm one of the lucky ones who I get to do exactly what I love every day when I wake up. And for me, my favorite is, I love Pompeii, but my true love is Iron Age near Rome. So that's where I work a lot there as well, and that's kind of my true love.
And are you familiar with anything to do with the Shroud of Turin? Somebody just texted in, they wanted to ask you, do you know anything about the recent carbon dating that they did, saying that it might actually be 2,000 years old, that the date might just be correct?
What was the artifact?
The Shroud of Turin.
Oh, yes, that's a great one. So I kind of buy it that the carbon dates are correct. We have a lot of things that, especially when you have something that is so meaningful to so many people, there's a lot of chance for either fraud or remaking it after a long time. Maybe there was an original and they redid it. So for me, I would trust the radiocarbon date on that, and I would say that that's probably more modern than we thought.
And is there anything, Vicki, that you'd love to see in DNA, or do you think that in terms of where we are with DNA, do you think it can get better and better and better, or has it hit a ceiling, DNA analysis in general?
No, not even close. I'm shocked every day at the new things that we can look at and test for, and as we get more samples, you're able to add more layers to what you can say. So in these scientific analyses, a lot of times sample size matters, preservation matters, and if you're running statistical tests, you need a lot to be able to prove your point. And so we're gaining more and we're able to do that stuff. And then one of the fields that I'm really interested in is also how we can look at ancient animal DNA. And so that's something that is that field is, 2 decades behind the human DNA side of things. And the animals that we as humans have raised or hunted or lived alongside for our whole existence, animals have always been so important. We can again use that as a way of understanding human choices, human experiences. So I'm excited to see where that goes as well. And hopefully I'll be able to work with my colleagues and make that happen as well.
I'm sure you will. But finally, before I let you go, Dr. Vicki, I've always wanted to ask an archaeologist a simple question. Indiana Jones, do you get to travel all over the world? And is it truly what we think being an archaeologist is like? It's a romantic job, an adventure.
Well, I'm more of a Lara Croft girl myself. But there's a lot of the romance to it. I'm really happy that I get to go and spend a lot of time working with these people who, live either wherever they are, if it's somewhere that's a big city or like Rome, or you're living in a small village. It's really just a kind of unique experience. You get so close to the people you're working with and sweating with. But there's also a little bit of tedium to it. You have to be ready to spend a lot of time nerding out over details to get it to the point of being really good research.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Vicki Moses, for coming on this evening to talk us through such a fascinating subject about Pompeii and learning things new that we thought we knew, but we don't know anything really, do we? And it's always good to keep digging, as they say. So thank you very much for joining me tonight all the way from Michigan. How's that? Well, that's all we have time for on tonight's edition of Nighttime Talk. Yeah, there was a little bit of a delay there. I know people have texted in, but that's what happens when you're talking to people across the Atlantic. But we'll be back tomorrow night to do it all over again. So do join me there. Join me then at 9 p.m. to midnight here on Nighttime Talk with Gary Brennan. See you tomorrow night. Sleep tight.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk.
Ireland's classic hits radio.